Is climate chaos a reality? If so, is it a natural phenomenon or man-made? If natural, what can we do to anticipate future problems? If man-made, how can we change our behavior to slow down and eventually reverse this procedure? As planet Earth continues to experience extreme weather conditions, the arguments and debates continue as to whether these are natural occurring events or man-made. Scientific research offers compelling observations and facts to support the idea that mankind has had a significant effect on the climate and that has severely damaged and impaired the status quo. What the status quo is a little hard to define, as is what point in human history did man start to have a significant effect on the immediate and wider environment. Deforestation, carbon emissions, fossil fuels and population explosion are all adding to the complex picture of climate change. Understanding the present situation is made no easier by uncertain world politics and the desire for full globalization. Mankind has witnessed many of Earth's recent climate changes, from ice ages to warm, moist climates. Approximately 13,000 years ago, Earth went through a cold patch, and within 500 years it reverted back to a warm, moist climate. The debate continues, is there really global warming? If so, is man responsible? If so, what can we do about it? If not, what is going on? In this new millennium, mankind faces many environmental challenges, most man-made. As the world population explodes, putting pressure on food production, energy use, water supplies, and habitation, the nations of the world will have to come together and deal with these issues regardless of their political and social differences. Humans expel carbon dioxide, and plant life use it together with light, water, to create energy, and they store it as sugar. During this process, called photosynthesis, oxygen is released as a byproduct. Most of the Earth's oxygen is released by plants. In fact, about 50% of the oxygen is released by tiny ocean plants, called phytoplankton. With an ever-increasing population that requires food, water, housing, and employment, the resources of planet Earth are understandably being exploited at a faster rate than they can be replenished. An ever-decreasing rainforest cover, especially in Brazil, reduces the plant life needed for the creation of oxygen. Catastrophe cannot be far off. An area the size of Great Britain is deforested every year, and in recent years, sometimes as much as 3 times the area of Great Britain has been lost. It was the Industrial Revolution that kicked off the dramatic increase in the population. But the 20th century has seen the greatest explosion in population, with post-Second World War being the most significant. Certainly since the onset of the Industrial Revolution, Earth has been heading for a showdown between nature, the needs of mankind, with its ever-increasing lust for throwaway consumer goods. The impact in just 100 years of mankind's misuse of the natural resources of Earth is devastating. The deforestation of the world's rainforests from the 1970s to the present day has been on an unprecedented scale. It would seem intelligent to err on the side of caution, given the obvious scenario of growing population and decreasing rainforests, not to mention industrialization. But the problem of global warming, climate change, it is global, and what one country may do irresponsibly with regards to carbon emissions affects not only neighboring countries or territories, but countries on the other side of the world. So any action on climate really requires a global response, which has been impossible to orchestrate even with the Kyoto Protocol and the Copenhagen Accord. With the recently concluded Lima climate change talks, it has become apparent that a watered-down accord was reached yet again. World trade and globalization, the need for energy in developing countries, and the ever-increasing human population has again delayed the action needed. Constant political and social changes, economic slowdown, and depressions, together with the ever-increasing world population, make it almost impossible to have a clear vision on what is needed and how to achieve this. Targets set on reusable energy and recycling by the EU and UN and other parties seem to be snatched out of thin air in an attempt to give the impression that those elected around the world are paying attention to this catastrophe. However, multinational corporations, excessive low-level consumerism, and the dreaded spectre and mantra of the free trade thinkers, globalization, will continue to devalue any attempt at solving the problem. Globalization creates jobs and stops wars, the mantra of governments and major corporations. But it really doesn't do that. It creates jobs in developing countries at the expense of workers in industrialized countries. It creates cheaper products for developed economies, giving the illusion of a greater wealth. However, it makes greater profits for international companies and their shareholders at the expense of the environment, the health of workers in low-paid economies, and employment in developed countries, and will eventually lead to conflict as energy becomes the catalyst for confrontation. How can we get the world governments to adopt an intelligent long-term strategy when most are in power for only a few years? And how can the cost be justified and green taxes used wisely by governments that have no real scientific understanding? Green taxes have been levied throughout the EU. Every household pays them, but what they are called and how much do we pay? Where does the money go? UK households and businesses paid a record £43 billion in green taxes in 2013. Environmental levies collected by the UK Treasury increased by £1.7 billion last year. The total green tax revenues for 2013 are the equivalent of £1,629 for every household. The cost to consumers of such green taxes has become increasingly controversial. The UK Treasury has already approved a significant increase in such levies to £7.6 billion in 2020. More than £500 million of the increase in the green taxes last year was due to rising renewable energy levies to subsidize the construction of wind and solar farms and other green technologies. We are now at the stage where many homes can manage their own energy with solar panels, insulation, heat exchangers. Why is the money being given to utility companies to supply energy, when most homes can produce energy and bypass the utility companies? A government's responsibility is the well-being of its people. With regards to the climate change, governments, and specifically the British government, has failed miserably by levying taxes upon households and businesses and funneling those funds into sustainable energy industries. Financing and funding existing utility companies is merely perpetuating the status quo. Science and technology have enabled countries to go past that limited system. With modern technology available, solar, wind, heat exchanger, insulation, and superior house building, the opportunity is there for each household to utilize these technologies and control their own energy production and use. There is no need for these outrageous green taxes to be levied on households and businesses, and then passed on to utility companies to continue their monopoly and manipulation of the energy industry. Each household can be masters of their own energy production and use. This one development would allow each household not to spend money on energy costs and would have a substantial disposable income, which could be spent on the high street, boosting the local and national income. The catastrophe of climate change is made worse by political chaos, laziness, and a total lack of understanding of the benefits that science can bring to our everyday lives. The belief that energy changes can only be brought about by multinationals is a sign that government has not only lost the plot, but also of government going off on its own little schemes that will of course not benefit the population or the planet as a whole. That mankind has caused significant damage to the planet's ecology is obvious, but the technology is available to correct that for the better. Political chaos has contributed much to the damage of the environment. The lack of political will and scientific understanding of governments, not to mention EU corruption and incompetence, continues to deliver a knockout blow to the ongoing attempts within Europe to significantly improve environmental conditions.